Okay guys, so this was an exciting chapter of Black Clover because we are getting round 2 of Asta versus Ichika, and the reason why this fight is so exciting in this chapter is because of the fact that ever since the first fight happened, the entirety of the fandom has been debating whether or not Ichika is actually as strong as the bottom makes her seem to be. Because if you remember at the end of the last fight, Asta said, and it was different depending on which translation you read, either the official one or the unofficial ones, but regardless of which translation you read, it pretty much came down to Asta saying that even if he was in Devil Union, Ichika using just Zen would have still beat him. And that one statement, regardless of which translation you read, drew the entirety of the fandom in turmoil, basically arguing back and forth whether or not Ichika was on the same level of 50% Lucifero or even possibly stronger than that, because Asta stated that even with Devil Union, he would not be able to beat her. And now in round 2, we have Asta using his Devil Union going up against Ichika, who is not only using her Zen, but also her Yorioku. So we know it is definitely serious for her this time, and regardless of the outcome, we'll finally hopefully be able to put this argument to bed. Okay, so the chapter opens up and we see Asta immediately go into his black form and then try to put some distance between himself and Ichika, but then she ends up pulling a Blackbeard and activating her Dark Yojutsu, Black Star, which actually activates a small dark hole in the palm of her hand and pulls Asta closer towards her. And then, as soon as Asta's close enough, she immediately goes in to use a Dark Slash on him, but Asta activates the Devil Union, trying to negate all the Yojutsu being used against him. And I guess she anticipated him doing that because she immediately switches up and throws a kick at him, sending him flying into the waterfall behind him. Then we get this really cool shot of Asta mostly covered up by a waterfall, preparing his own counterattack, and we see him use his Infinite Slash Equinox, which to me at first seemed like a way too powerful attack for him to be throwing out willy-nilly when he's not actually trying to kill his opponent, but we see that he actually planned on her dodging that attack so he can actually get at her while she's in the air and she couldn't move. But just as he goes to actually hit her with one of his own slashes, she ends up dodging his attack by using her Dark Star to increase her own agility, making her a lot faster than she originally was. But before she can even do anything with her new speed, we see Asta use his Demon Destroyer Sword to negate her spell, and then the two of them end up charging at each other at full speed, planning to end this fight with one last Zen attack, and Asta ends up being just a little bit too slow and Ichika manages to land a hit on him, sending him flying down into the ground. And then this is when we get the first bit of dialogue between the two of them from the entirety of the chapter, almost near the end of it. And we have Ichika first starting off by saying that Asta's just too weak to ever achieve his dream of being the Wizard King, and that he should basically give up now. And Asta's response to her is actually really interesting because he pretty much just ignores the insult she just threw at him, and says that basically he can sense the anger and hatred that she has in her ki towards him and Yami, but there's more to it than just that. And I mentioned in my spoiler video that I think when it comes down to it, Ichika is not really mad at Yami for killing her clan when they were kids. What it comes down to is I think she actually is holding resentment towards him for essentially abandoning her over these past few years. Because we saw in the flashback in the last chapter that Ichika was very connected to Yami. She was tied to him at the hip, basically the same way that Asta is. And if the rest of her clan was anything like their dad, who we saw in the last chapter was a total piece of shit, then we know that Ichika probably figured out that Yami had a pretty good reason for doing what he did. More than likely they were probably planning, like I said in my last video, a coup, and either were trying to kidnap or assassinate Ryu, and Yami just stepped in and stopped them. He might have taken it a little too far, but he did what he had to do. And we can tell that Ichika is a pretty smart character, so over the last 15 plus years, she probably figured out that Yami had to do what he did in order to basically protect Ryu, which is something that she most likely would agree with. And that's the reason why I think that it comes down to that because she was so connected to Yami and so attached to him when they were kids, that her resentment towards him mostly stemmed from her being upset that he just basically left her behind in the country while he went to a completely different continent and lived up, as far as she's concerned, an easy life. Because essentially, Yami was the only family she had. Her mother died at childbirth, her dad couldn't stand her. He was most likely the only connection, the only familial connection that she had, and as far as she's concerned, he abandoned her. So of course she's going to have some resentment towards him for that. And then when it comes down to Asta, this guy who's basically become Yami's protege, and it's her eyes, her replacement next to him, of course she's going to be very jealous of him for that. Then we see the two of them go in for one last final strike, and we actually end up finding out from Asta in this moment that he figured out exactly what his style Zen is, and he actually plans on using it against Ichika for their final attack. But surprisingly enough, before either one of them can actually hit the other, we see Ryu jump in and pretty easily stop both attacks. And you know what, this actually isn't really all that surprising. I mean, yeah, it's been said that Ryu has no Yorioku, which meant he had no magic power, but we all knew that there was something more to him than just his clairvoyance. We all knew he had some kind of abilities that was just outside of that, and that's the reason why he's a shogun. I mean, he does hold a position that's equivalent to the Wizard King, who is supposed to be the strongest in the entire Clover Kingdom. So, you know, if he's going to be equivalent to that, he has to have some level of power outside of just his clairvoyance. and I guess we're going to see a glimpse of that in this chapter. Now, once the fight's over, we have Asta saying to himself that he couldn't actually perform his Zen properly, and that he's admitting complete defeat against Ichika, and that he just needs a little bit more training, a little bit more pushing, in order to actually perform his Zen style properly. So yeah, we have Asta for the second time in this chapter admitting that Ichika is stronger than him even when he's using his Devil Union. Now, I mean, obviously this isn't the 5-horn true Devil Union or even his regular base Devil Union. It's mostly a partial Devil Union because we saw that one of his arms, as long as this wasn't a color mistake, isn't fully colored in black. So he was only using partial Devil Union during this fight, but the fact that he was actually being completely trounced by Ichika throughout the entire fight, even in partial Devil Union, shows exactly how strong she is. And we can kind of guess that at the very least, when it comes to him being in his actual full base Devil Union, more than likely the two of them will be at the very least evenly matched, and I would still personally end up giving it to her just on battle experience. Now, I mean, of course, like Asta mentioned, he couldn't properly use his Zen during their fight, so maybe once he actually masters that, that might give him the edge over Ichika even when he's only using his partial Devil Union. But as of right now, based on where he's at ability wise, we can definitely say that Ichika is at least slightly stronger than Asta. Anyway, then at the very end of the chapter, when they decide to go see Fumito to get Asta healed up and get a home cooked meal for him, we see Ryu stop for a second, look up at the sky, and say, "They've come." And then we cut over on the last page to see that Sister Lilly and 2 other paladins are floating above the land of the sun. And by the way, one of the 2 paladins looks just like Heath Grice, the character who Asta, Magna, and Noelle fought against on their first mission to get a magic stone, who ended up killing himself in chapter 9. So yeah, obviously after that last page, I have a bunch of questions, starting off with how the hell is Heath alive? I mean, yeah, we know that Lucius has soul magic, so he could actually use that to revive his soul, but without Dante's body magic, or any of his siblings' body magics for that matter, because you would need all 3 of them, how the hell is he alive in an actual physical body? I mean, I can understand his soul floating around, but how does he have an actual body that looks exactly like his original body? I don't know, we're gonna have so many questions that need to be answered by Tabata over these next few chapters in order to figure out exactly how this guy is back. On top of that, how did the 3 of them end up making it over to the land of the sun? I mean, my first guess is that Lucius used his time magic, or he figured out some way to basically predict that Asta was here and sent him there to basically finish the job. Also, who's that 3rd paladin that's with them? Because he looks a little bit like Rebchi, but it can't be him because he doesn't have a scar over his eye, so I'm still concerned about who that guy is. And then of course there's a question of which high-ranking Devil Souls did Lucius give these to, because that's going to determine exactly what kind of magic they can use now. And I guess of course it doesn't really matter what magic or which souls they have, because they're probably going to be too strong for Asta and Ichika, who are now tired of the fight, to take on. And I'm guessing that this means that the next chapter we're going to get introduced to at least one of the 3 remaining Reason 7 members that we haven't been introduced to just yet. Most likely the strongest member, and we're going to see him or her or whoever it is step in and basically drive the 3 of them back and basically buy a little bit more time for us to train some more. Anyway, that is it for the review, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Comment down below your thoughts on the chapter, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.